Welcome to Design Domination, where you'll gain confidence, clarity, and a competitive edge in a crowded marketplace so you can dominate your competition. Hi, and thanks for tuning in. I'm Colleen Grotzer, and in this episode of Design Domination, I'm talking about how to make headings accessible, whether they're on a website or in a document. Stay tuned to find out what not to do, and I see these things all the time, and what to do instead. Now, as you may know, creating inclusive content is essential for accessibility, and it also helps you reach a wider audience. But it can also help with search engine optimization. Now, one way to make your content more accessible, whether you're creating a document or you're formatting website content, is to use an accessible heading structure. So I'm going to share a bunch of easy, actionable tips so that you can make your headings more accessible. And this is going to help the content be better understood and by a wider audience. And like I said, it can help with SEO. Okay, so let's talk about why headings are important for accessibility. Well, they're important because they provide a hierarchy for the content, okay? And there are 6 levels of available headings from H1 through H6, and they rank in order of most to least important. Heading tags are also semantic tags, which mean they convey meaning to assistive technology. They also provide a visual hierarchy for sighted users who can scan the headings of a page and see what the page is about and then find what they need quickly. But they also provide a structural hierarchy for users of screen readers, for example, who might be blind or have low vision or a cognitive disability. And screen readers or other assistive technology will convey to the user that these are headings and what level of heading they are. And these assistive technology users can also bring up a list of headings on a web page or in a document so that they can go straight to them. Now, I see a lot of the same mistakes with headings, which means that the outline of the page content gets disrupted and or users of assistive technology might be confused and find it hard to navigate the content. Now, something I see a lot on websites, and actually in documents too, I see that headings have been used because of their looks. Like the level of heading has been chosen because of how it looks, because of its size and weight, instead of adjusting the look of the heading in the CSS or in the document. And I also often see body text that has been formatted as a heading. So it stands out as large and bold, again, instead of formatting it as body text and styling it to look differently. You know, just because text is big and bold does not mean it should be promoted to a heading. Now, when body text is formatted as a heading, it makes it difficult for users to navigate and understand the page content. Now, another common mistake that I see is not using headings at all. So I see body text that has been styled as bold and not as a heading, and it actually introduces a new section. So it really should be a heading, not because it's bold, but because it introduces a new section. Another thing I see that a lot of web designers and developers and even SEO folks, they will choose a heading level based on the importance that they want to assign it, right? Or to take away from it for SEO purposes. So, for example, they might give headings in the footer area a lower level heading, such as H6, simply because that content isn't as important as other content. On the other hand, I also sometimes see where some headings have been formatted at a higher level than they should have in order to tell search engines that they're more important. Another issue that might happen when you choose a heading based on its looks or for SEO purposes is that headings might get skipped. Well, let's say a web page has an H1 and then no other headings in the main page content. And then maybe the footer has a few H6 headings. Okay, so you've got 4 levels of headings that just got skipped in the process. And again, all of this disrupts the outline of the page content, right? And so what happens is you get improperly ordered content that doesn't make sense. It makes it difficult for someone to navigate that content, so it takes the users longer to find what they're looking for. It also causes users of assistive technology to think that they might have missed some content somewhere. Now, having said all that, when you go from, say, an H4 to an H2, you're not actually skipping a heading level. It's only when you go from top to bottom. Not every section is going to have the same number of subsections as another section. Okay, another issue with headings that I see is headings to nowhere, as I call them. And I see these on websites and I see them in documents too. And by that, I mean text that's been formatted as a heading, but has no content after it. So for example, let's say there's an H3 that has no body text after it. Only another H3 follows it. Remember, headings are structural and users can navigate by headings. Someone using a screen reader can pull up a list of headings on a page and then select one, go to that, and then in this case, they would find no content after it. So that wouldn't be very helpful. Okay, so those are things not to do. So let's talk about what to do. Okay, so the first thing is about using the H1 heading. On a website, it's best practice to have only one H1 heading, which represents the main topic and the title for that page, and it's usually at the start of the page content. Documents, on the other hand, might have more than one H1 heading, especially if they're long, complex documents where you could potentially run out of the 6 available heading levels. So it's appropriate there to use an H1 for the document title, and then each major section, right? So you might have a table of contents and then chapter titles. Another practice is about ordering headings. Proper heading order is important. So when you're formatting headings, it's important to understand a bit about the content and which headings should be which level. Okay, it's helpful to think of the heading hierarchy as an outline or a table of contents for that web page or for that document. So let's take a look at an example, right? You might have a page that's about fruit. So the H1 might be fruit. And then there might be a section about apples, and that would have apples as an H2. Well, the apples section may then talk about different types of apples, right? Such as Granny Smith and Red Delicious. Well, those would be H3 headings because they're within the apples section, right? So there's got the H2 of apples, and then Granny Smith and Red Delicious are H3s. Right? So there's subheads for that section. They get more specific within that section. Okay, so let's say there's also a section on bananas. Well, that would have an H2 called bananas. And that's because it would be equal level to the apples section because they're both types of fruit. Okay, then there might be sections about different types of bananas, such as Cavendish and Ladyfinger. So those would be headings as well. And so they would be H3 headings because they're under the H2 heading of bananas. They're in the H2 section. Okay, so again, they would be headings if they introduce new sections. And they would be H3s because they're subsections of the bananas H2 section. So H1 is the most general, and then the H2s are more specific, and then H3s are more specific, and then so on. And it's also good practice to use consecutive heading levels, meaning don't skip heading levels. Okay, remember, someone who cannot visually see the page content may get confused and think that content was missed, or it may just confuse the hierarchy of the content and therefore affect their understanding of it. Another practice involves writing accessible headings. So when you're coming up with headings, keep the text short and to the point. And don't just stuff headings with keywords for search engines. You also want to make sure the heading text makes sense to the reader and describes the content of the section accurately. Another practice is images in headings. Okay, because text is not the only content that could end up in a heading tag, right? So sometimes I see that images have been added to a heading tag. So a lot of times what I see is that designers have inserted an image as part of a heading tag to get it to align with the heading. But really, it shouldn't be part of the heading. Okay, so you can use images in headings, but I don't recommend this unless there is no text content in the heading. And that's because the alt text for the image will get voiced as part of the heading. So if you have text and an image inside of a heading tag, instead of getting only the text content, users of assistive technology will also get the alt text with it. And this just makes it harder for someone to find what they're looking for. Now, if the image is decorative and it's inside a heading tag with text, and you apply null alt text on the web, or you artifact it if it's in a document, that's fine because it won't be recognized as part of the heading and it will be ignored by assistive technology. However, if you have an image that is the only content of the heading tag and no text, then you definitely want to add alt text to the image. Because if there's no text in the heading and there's no alt text on the image, then it will be an empty heading. So that means that someone using a screen reader or other type of assistive technology could get confused and think they're missing out on some content. Okay, so how can you check for these things? Well, there's actually a few ways. You can check your websites and documents for proper headings. So for websites, there are a lot of automated checkers out there that will assess the heading hierarchy of a web page. And one is Accessibility Checker by Equalize Digital, which is a free and paid plugin for WordPress. And another one is Wave, which is a website and browser extension. There's also the Headings Map browser extension as well. Now for documents, you can use the Acrobat Accessibility Checker. Okay, but these are all automated checkers I'm talking about, and there are important caveats to know about them because automated checkers can only detect about 25 to 30% of accessibility issues, give or take. And a lot of manual checks have to be done to determine certain things. An automated checker, for example, can tell you if a heading level was skipped, right? But it can't tell you if what was tagged as an H3, for example, really should be an H2. Or if body text that has been tagged as a heading should really just be a paragraph tag instead. So it's really important for someone to actually review the content for the proper headings in addition to the automated checks, and also checking for brevity and clarity of those headings too, like the actual text that's used for the headings. Now, it can also be helpful to conduct user testing to assess the content of your headings to make sure that they make sense for users. I hope this was helpful and that this is going to help you master accessible headings. If you're interested in finding out some other simple things that you can do for accessibility, go to creative-boost.com/freebies, where you'll find 5 different accessibility free guides that pertain to InDesign and PDF accessibility, as well as website accessibility.